Welcome to part 2 of War of the Worldviews. Let's watch as Ken exposes more of the traps unwary Christians can fall into if they are not properly educated in a biblical worldview. Remember, the war is not between science and the Bible, but rather between evolution and the Bible. Big difference.
Now remember back to our fact. Remember I said, here's a fact for you. What's missing? What was that originally? I gave you a starting point, a presupposition to think about the fact, but I only gave you one starting point. I said, what's missing? Most of us didn't think I should question his presupposition. Maybe there's a different presupposition I can use to understand that fact. I forced you to think in terms of my one presupposition, where in reality, there's two different starting points. When you walk into secular museums, you can see skeletons. You don't really see, you don't see evolution. You know where evolution is? It's on the glass cases used to interpret the facts. And they're forcing you to think in a particular way, but there could be a whole different way of thinking about the same facts. So then, how do you find out who's right? Well, what we can do, we can use observational science, and we can take that observational science and we can apply it to those interpretations. For instance, if we take observational science, chemistry, in the present, we find that really the evidence is more consistent. When you look at DNA, there's an intelligence behind the universe. And certainly there's no evidence consistent with, it could arise from matter by itself. When we apply observational science to changes in dogs, it really confirms kinds, because dogs remain dogs, elephants remain elephants. There's no evidence there of a mechanism to change one kind into another when you study genetics. And then when you study the fossils and you study the rock layers, actually what you find over the earth is more consistent with catastrophic processes, not millions of years of processes, and catastrophic processes that happened in recent times. When you look at people groups and you look at genetics, what you see is more consistent with what the Bible says, that God created us to start with as one man and one woman. We're all descendants of Adam and Eve, the event of the Tower of Babel. It's not consistent with us evolving from ape-like creatures or anything like that. And so it goes on. And what I wanted to do is just give you a practical example here. Do animals change? And the answer is yes. Dogs do change. What do they change into? Dogs. And we're going to look at that, okay? So we're going to apply observational science to the dog kind. Now, for those that believe in Darwinian evolution, they believe over millions of years one kind of animal changed into another. And when Darwin looked around the world and, he sailed around the world on his boat, the Beagle, and he looked at different animals and so on, he saw that there were differences, and he believed that those differences over long periods of time could add up to big changes to evolve one kind into another. I'm going to show you tonight that even if you had all the time, the little changes will not add up to big changes anyway. Here's what the evolutionists say about dogs. They say the origin of the domestic dogs from wolves has been established, suggesting a common origin from a single gene pool for all dog populations. If all dogs come from a single gene pool, how many kinds of dogs are there? Kinds. Ultimately, there's only one kind of dog. What's it called? Dog. Okay. And they say that domestic dogs, for instance, came from something like this, wolves. So this is even a dog. I mean, it doesn't look like a dog, but it really is a dog. And what the evolutionists even agree, the secular scientists say, that they came from that. By the way, some people say, is that evolution? If that was evolution, you'd really be in trouble. Because that's a downhill change. That's going from a real dog to a pseudo-degenerate mutant dog. I mean, it really is. And as you actually look at what's happening in dogs, it really is a downhill change. I want you to understand that. It's not an uphill change as you need for an evolutionary process. But let me explain to you. If anyone has the evidence for evolution in the world, it'd be the Natural History Museum in London. Here you are in Darwin's home territory. And so you walk in there, and here's the first sign. Before Charles Darwin, most people believed that God created all living things in exactly the form we see them today. This is the basis of the doctrine of creation. Is that true? That is not true. That is false. I don't want to be a stumbling block to you, but this is some of the best evidence in the world for evolution. And so I hate to do this to you because I'd hate to think some of you are convinced by this, but I've got to do it anyway, so let me do it, okay. So the first glass case. Dogs. And they say, look, dogs change. Man, I started to question the Bible right there. Man. And then they say, look, horses change. Oh boy, you're starting to think, but can I really believe the Bible? I mean, look at that. Horses change. Wow. I mean, don't you think that starts to make you question the Bible could be true? Horses change into horses. I'm really worried. Moths. Oh, boy, this is almost devastating. Look at the changes there. Oh, I don't think I can go on. I don't want you to be led astray here. Oh, rabbits. Oh, boy. Look, the ears are different. What am I going to do? And ducks. There's some different colours. Maybe the Bible's not true after all. Daisies. Oh, this is getting overwhelming. And the next one, I was ready to, I just couldn't handle the next one. It was about weasels. And they made this statement, when weasels breed together, they produce more weasels like themselves. And then the diagram was devastating. I mean, it was just, this is the leading evidence for evolution. And then they make the statement. In this exhibition, we've tried to show how Darwin's theory of natural selection can explain how living things evolved. Now they're talking about molecules to man evolution, but what do you see in the glass cases? Change. Oh, but creationists believe animals don't change. Oh, but look, we saw changes. Oh, therefore, because we saw evolution, changes, therefore evolution, molecules to man is true. Oh, do you see how they've indoctrinated you? And you know, the way to understand this is really pretty easy. We don't know how many dogs God made. Let's say he made 2 dogs to start with, and you end up with lots of dogs eventually, as you know. And people say, okay, but how do you get dingoes, wolves, coyotes, etc.? Well, you know, in genetics, we have a convention where we label genes with big A, big B, little b, dominant recessive genes. And here's a male and female dog, and you get big A, big B, little b. It's more complicated than this, but these are the general principles, as you know, and they apply. And so from one male and one female, sexual reproduction, you get one set of genes from one from the other. Here's a combination. Here's some more combination. Now, if you look at those, if that male and female were dogs, okay, then what are these down here? Dogs. And notice they're all a little different to each other because they all have a different combination of information, but they're still 100% what? Dogs. And this one doesn't have any little a's or little b's. This one doesn't have any big A's or big B's. So these have actually lost information compared to the parents. Still got the information to be a dog, the right number of genes to be a dog, but you've lost variability. And that's what we really need to understand. What Darwin observed was not a process of change that would change one kind into another. He observed the hand of God in the phenomenal variability that God placed there. For instance, do you know how many atoms are in the universe? Has anyone here counted the atoms in the universe? Anyone tried to count the atoms in the universe? Scientists estimate the number of atoms in the universe is a 1 followed by 80 zeros. That's sort of a large number. I mean, that's so large you can't even talk about it. But you know what else is fascinating? If you took one man and one woman from this audience, do you know how many children you could potentially have without having 2 with the same combination of information? Well, if you're considering having a large family, here's what you can aim for. There's the number of atoms estimated in the whole universe. Here's the number of possible combinations of children from your genes without having 2 the same. Do you see the handiwork of God in that? The phenomenal amount of variability of information God placed there. And you know what? He put that sort of information in cats, in dogs, in elephants, so that, as you start to think about it, think of the event of Noah's Ark and Noah's flood. The Bible says God brought 2 of every kind of land animal, 7 of some, but 2 of every, on board that ark. Dogs, it would have been 2 dogs. So those 2 dogs, after they came out of Noah's Ark, they got married, had kids, and you end up with lots more dogs again, okay? And then those dogs aren't going to stay together. They're going to split up and they're going to move away from each other. And as they do, what's going to happen? You're going to get different combinations of genes that move in different directions, end up in different directions. Let me help you understand. Here are 2 dogs from Noah's Ark, and they have genes for short hair and long hair. Sometimes genes interact together like these. The short hair, long hair interact together and give medium hair length, okay? So if those 2 dogs came off Noah's Ark, you could statistically get an offspring that had a short-haired gene from one and a short-haired from the other. You get a short-haired dog. And you could get 2 that had a short hair from one and a long hair from the other, and so you get the same as the parents. Notice the one with short hair is different to the parents, but it's not a new characteristic, right? It's just it's got a different combination and actually does have less information because it doesn't have the information for long hair. And then you can get one that has the 2 long-haired genes, and you get a long-haired dog. By the way, it's got less information. See, it's got longer hair than the short-haired one, but it still has less information than the parents because it doesn't have the gene for short hair, it's just got the gene for long hair. You see what I'm saying there? There's no new characteristics there, it's just different combinations. And you imagine then if all the dogs that started to increase in number after Noah's flood, if they started to move away from each other, if some went towards a cold climate, those with short hair or medium hair length died out because they didn't survive that well, and only the long-haired dogs survive, then their offspring are going to have what? Long hair. And in fact, all their offspring will have long hair, and they'll never produce short-haired dogs again until they mix back with other dogs to get back that gene that they lost. Now, what they call that is natural selection. And it's probably much more complicated than this because it probably involves a lot of genetic factors as well that we're starting to discover. But in a very simplistic way, dogs that move towards a cold climate, you end up with those with a certain combination of genes surviving better than others. In a hot climate, and over a period of time, you can end up with different species of dogs, but that's not evolution, that's 100% dogs. And yet that's the sort of thing that's taught in the public schools as evidence for molecules to man evolution. Students, when you understand it, it's the opposite of evolution. And then to get our domestic varieties of dogs, like these, what we do is we determine which ones breed with which. And I want you to understand one little thing here, and that's this. That is, you see, what we call our purebreds, we try to eliminate variability and get down to something like this. Little a, big, little b, little c, little c. If you breed this one, this is more like a poodle. If you breed this with another one the same, you get the same, right? These up here are more like wolves. See, if you started with wolves all over again, theoretically you could possibly get poodles. But if you start with poodles, you're not going to get wolves again unless you mixed everything back together to get back all the original information.